I was born in New Braunfels in May 1st, 1926. And I lived there for the first 7 years of my life. This was in the Depression. And in my first 7 years in New Braunfels were through the 4th grade. And we lived very well. My father was manager of a lumber yard in New Braunfels, and also was half owner in the Canal Creamery that his brother owned the other half. Then the Depression hit while we were still in New Braunfels. It came to, 1929, Depression happened, but it didn't hit Texas until about 1933 or 34. And we were in the Depression before we moved to San Antonio. My mother had a real difficult time keeping a job. Jobs were hard to find. And we moved to Houston. She had her mother and sister and brother living in Houston. So we moved over there for a while. Imagine she ran out of money a number of times, like everybody else. Everybody was in bad. We moved back to San Antonio, then we moved back to Houston, and then my mother and dad got together again. And in the meantime, and what happened to my dad, the lumber yard went broke, and so he lost the job as manager. And then he just had half of the creamery. And he had a friend in St. Louis at the WWII brewery in St. Louis. And he talked him into becoming a beer distributor in the hill country. And so his business picked up then, and he made a lot of money out of that. And in the meantime, we were moving back and forth, and finally my mother gave up and gave my brother and me to her sister and brother in Houston, and so we moved to Houston. My brother and I did live with my aunt and uncle there, and by that time I was 17 years old. About 4 or 5 of us boys in the graduating class went down and joined the service. We wanted to become flyers, Air Force. So we thought we were joining the Air Force. And at that time, the services each week or each month, they put you wherever they wanted to when you joined. So they put me in the Coast Guard, all 4 of us in the Coast Guard. They shipped us to Florida for basic training. And when we got there, they said, "You're now in the Navy." So I thought I was in the Air Force, in the Coast Guard, and then the Navy, all in a month's time, 1 month. But what happened, President Roosevelt combined there was only two services in World War II, the Navy and the Army. So everybody in the Coast Guard or Merchant Marine were suddenly in the United States Navy. So it was only Army and Navy. And so I was in the Navy. I finished my basic training in Florida, and they shipped us to New York, to a receiving station in Manhattan, and they sent me over across the East River to Brooklyn Navy Yard to two schools. I went to radar school and yeoman school, and so where I was stationed was right below the Brooklyn Bridge in Manhattan. I finished the school and they shipped me to Boston, and I went on a ship called USS Campbell in Boston. And she had just come back from Greenland. She had rammed a submarine and had some damage, and they had to repair it in the Boston dry dock. And I went aboard, she was still in dry dock, and they finished that. And we went to sea for trials up in the North Atlantic, and then came back and got some new guns on board, heavy guns, different kinds. And then we went to the Caribbean and our job was to chase the German submarines out of the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. They were sinking all the tankers coming up from Venezuela and Argentina. They were coming up with all this oil, coming through the Caribbean, the Gulf, and then bringing the oil into Texas. And some of it was going up the East Coast. But the German subs were sinking all these tankers. So it was our job. Our ship was the task force commander of 7 other destroyers. And then they sent us back to Norfolk, Virginia to start to escort business in the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean. So we escorted convoys. We were the task force commander again, and we protected the convoys going over to England and into the Mediterranean, and taking troops to England and all the equipment, the tanks and everything, all the food and everything. We were supplying England. We kept them from losing the war. Almost ran out of tankers and oil tankers and merchant ships carrying all the supplies to England for the war. And same way going to the Mediterranean, we were supplying them to carry on the war in Africa. See, the war is going on in Africa, and we were supplying all the troops in Africa. Finally, we made about 6 trips that way. And my last one was the invasion of southern France. That was in August. And then we came, and in the meantime, they'd invaded Normandy, the West France, on June 6th. And southern France we invaded in August 14th. And we went to Norfolk, Virginia, and were assigned to the Pacific. So we took on more fuel and ammunition and everything, and we went down through the Caribbean and across the Panama Canal and went to San Diego, resupplied, took on fuel, and went to Pearl Harbor. And at Pearl Harbor, I got off to get my little dental work done, some teeth filled, and discovered I'd been on the ship for 25 months, and you were only supposed to be in the Navy, you're only supposed to stay on one ship 24 months, and then you were transferred off. So I was transferred off, and I worked in headquarters for 2 weeks. And I wanted to go back to sea, so I got the commander to assign me to another ship in Pearl Harbor. It was a USS Dickman. It was a large transport for troops and equipment. And we went to, from there, we went to Eniwetok in the Marshall Islands. Well, I take you back. We had to go back to San Francisco and pick up troops, and then we went to the Marshall Islands, and it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ships there, ready to go into North Japan to invade northern Japan. When I was there, they dropped a bomb in Japan, and the war ended. So we had 2,000 troops on board. So they sent us to Manila to drop the troops off as replacements, and we went to we picked up 1,400 POWs out of the prison camps in the Philippines and brought them back to the United States, to San Francisco. We loaded fresh troops up in San Francisco and took them to Pearl Harbor as replacements. And then we went to Seattle, Washington. And I got off then. The war in Japan had ended then. And I had enough points to get out. You had to have 45 points, and I had enough points. And so they sent me to an intake and replacement center, and there they sent me for a week ski trip up on Mount Rainier. All the guys there got to go. And then they put us on a train, and we went to Chicago through a blizzard. It was a blizzard all the way across the northern United States. I got to Chicago and got on a fast train there to New Orleans, and I got my discharge. The guy that was with me, my buddy, and the train was all full of servicemen going home. And he invited me to his home. He lived in New Orleans for Christmas dinner. And the next day we went down to Federal Building in New Orleans and got our discharges, and I got my mustering out paying tickets to home